Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy MKS, back here with the fourth and final video of the night. Although I have recorded on both, or I am recording both on Facebook and YouTube, so in effect, I've made 8 videos altogether. So smart, you see. Just kidding, but trying to add a bit of add my lame humor to this video. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it, especially people who love Singapore. Yeah, I want to talk about some of the reasons why I love Singapore, but I want to start with a couple of negatives first. One thing, probably the only thing, despite knowing little about Singapore, probably the only thing I'm not too keen on about Singapore is that it's quite a dictatorship in terms of rules. Like, for instance, they banned chewing gum, but a lot of people say that's quite good because it makes the streets really clean. And that kind of thing, but I think a lot of people think that's the reason why they banned chewing gum, and as well as some fruit that smells really bad or whatever. But I think the reason why they banned chewing gum is because someone put the chewing gum on train doors or something like that, or somewhere on the train, and it caused havoc when it got stuck or whatever. So I think that's the reason why they actually banned chewing gum. But a lot of people say it does make the streets a lot cleaner and all that kind of thing. But I'm not a big fan of too many rules or laws, anti-law laws, as a libertarian. And another thing they said, which I think is quite good in a way, but it's something I don't quite agree with, which is that they have a lot of like social housing. Someone was mentioning, a minister said that they have a lot of social housing, or as we would call it here in the UK, like council housing, but it's probably quite good quality. But once again, like, they made a rule where I suppose we would call it quotas, racial quotas or whatever, where apparently a certain amount of people from each racial or ethnic group have to live in those houses. So he was saying when they go to school and work and things like that, they sort of go to school and work in the same places. So that brought people together a lot more. So there's a lot less racial tension than there are in a lot of other countries. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there was another rule that they made. I can't think of it. Anyway, yeah. So there's a few sort of dictatorial rules, and I think some people say Singapore is the only successful dictatorship, financially successful dictatorship. But I would love to support more libertarianism. So I think that they should allow people to have chewing gums. Maybe they could give them fines for littering and causing damage or things like that. But I think they should give people more freedoms in many ways, and look at a more libertarian way of doing things. But that's my personal opinion. So I just thought I'd get some of the negatives out of the way. Another negative thing I want to talk about, which I talked about in some of my other videos, I forgot to mention I don't know much about Malaysia or Indonesia or even India, even though I'm part Indian myself. But there's a lot of those things about those countries which I would probably find mysterious, and I don't know a huge amount about, basically. Hence, I would find them mysterious. But yeah, another negative thing, I suppose, is I wanted to apologise once again for my inability to improve my punctuation and overall general writing style. So please forgive me for that. But yeah, on to the more positives. The reason why I love Singapore, again, it goes back to what I mentioned in previous videos. Sorry for people who have already watched those. But for anyone who didn't, I mentioned how, like, they looked after Eurasians. In both Malaysia and Singapore's case, which used to be one country, used to be one nation, and it's split into two. But the Kristangs, as they're called, which are part Portuguese and part Malaysian or Singaporean, I suppose, again, they used to be one country. So if I'm not mistaken, I think Kristangs are pretty much always part Portuguese and part indigenous to what once was Malaysia. But if I'm not mistaken, could be mistaken. So if anyone knows any differently, please let me know. And I'd love to know, on that note, any facts, stats, figures, and general info you know about Singapore, and what are your suggestions on what are the best ways to support Singapore. Once again, I would love for them. Again, sorry for people who have already watched those videos, I suppose, but and also, I suppose, for those who haven't watched them, they probably wouldn't have heard me say them before, obviously. They wouldn't have heard me say them, but I would love to unite together Malaysia, India, Indonesia, even South Africa and Singapore to sort of form a network, which I call MIISAS. So to bring those nations together so they can learn from each other and even learn from the rest of the world. And I love to support Singaporean trade and even visit Singapore, support their tourism industry and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd love to know what any ideas and suggestions you have for benefiting and just generally supporting Singapore, and what do you think are the best ways to support them? When it comes to religion or spirituality, I think with Asian nations, they should say whichever. I think they could get mosques, churches, and other such organizations and whatnot, religions and spiritual groups, to compete to invest the most or donate the most to Asian causes, to try and convert people and win people over. But that's my opinion, as controversial as it might be. But yeah, I can't think of much else to say about which I haven't already covered in the videos on Malaysia, India, and Indonesia, the version for those nations, which is like why I love Malaysia, India, and Indonesia as well. So please check those out if you haven't already done so. Sorry about my voice, it feels a bit croaky at the moment, but it's probably about time for me to sleep. I should sleep more early, but trying to eat this chocolate, but I feel a bit rude eating and talking at the same time. But it's kind of melting, or it's already melted. But yeah, I love to support, as I say, Malaysian, Indonesian, and Singaporean industry, and I hope they'll all benefit mutually. I'm not sure if I should go on about the Italian football and Celtic thing, because I mentioned those in my previous videos, but I'd love for Singapore to invest in Italian football or soccer, calcio, footy, or whatever you call it. And given alliterations, I would love for them to invest in one of the teams that begin with S, like Sampdoria, Sassuolo, Salernitana, Spal, or Spezia, we pronounce it, and also Celtic. Anyway, I'm going to stop waffling. And again, I would love to read how you think Malaysian, in this case, Singaporean industry could be benefited. What are some of the worst and best things, in your opinion, about Singapore? And especially if you've been to Singapore, you know anything about Singapore. I'd love to read any comments on that. Or if you want to make your own version of this video and why you love Singapore, please feel free to do so. And I hope maybe there could be a Zoom group that discusses things about Singapore, or even on Facebook. I mean, on Facebook could be used to promote that Zoom group as well, and just generally discuss ideas to benefit Singapore, as well as those other nations I talked about, and how they can network together, and whatever else can benefit Singapore. It has a great airlines, a great airport, and many great things about it. But yeah, I suppose I love them to say thank you for, and I would love to say thank you by benefiting their nation for looking after Chris Tanks. Anyway, peace and love. I am out.